to take a call on this bill, which does a few things that I want to just talk about briefly, and then perhaps briefly talk about some matters of principle. It, of course, creates the position of Deputy Judicial Conduct Commissioner, and it's surprising in a way, Mr. Speaker, that this wasn't done under the initial law that created a Judicial Conduct Commissioner, because, of course, one can think of any manner of reasons why a commissioner may have to rescind his or her position. There may be a conflict of interest, or at least a perceived one. The legal community is relatively small. Any lawyer who's been in a big firm will have certainly worked with and amongst lawyers who've gone on to be judges at all sorts of levels, and will undoubtedly have many friends who are lawyers, probably a few enemies as well, Mr. Speaker, but certainly friends. And so those perceived conflicts can arise, so that a deputy is a necessary component of the system. I mean, of course, there's other reasons. The Commissioner might be absent, overseas, incapacitated. My recollection is there has been situations where that's arisen, certainly with the Commissioner being overseas for periods of time. So it's welcome that we've done this, or that we are doing this, and it's timely. The other thing, or another thing, that this bill does is it increases the associate judges of the High Court from 6 to 9, at least potentially. I don't think that those positions have to be filled, but there is now scope for 9. I would say the position of associate judge of the High Court is an important one. They're, I suppose, in many ways unsung heroes that push through a large volume of commercial work, civil work in our courts. It can be a bit like, Mr. Speaker, a supermarket or something in the list before an associate judge, with many lawyers, often some lay litigants and the like. And they really do, as I say, do an invaluable job, not just for the court system actually, but for our commercial community, and to ensure that business in this country functions. I certainly have some fond and not so fond memories of appearing before masters as a young lawyer. My first appearance in court ever was before Master Anne Gambrell, a great trailblazer really for women lawyers and certainly judges. And I remember in the firm I was in, a slightly older lawyer than me couldn't be bothered going up, and I don't know what coloured shirt I was wearing, but we had a practice at the time. You had to have a white shirt to go to court. So I went to Hugh Wright's and I bought a white shirt for about $29.99 at the time, and I had my first court appearance, and I shakingly got up and read to Master Anne Gambrell something like, "May it please the court, the parties by consent seek an adjournment," or something. And I sat down, and fortunately she didn't ask me any questions. She was good to me, and I recall appearing many times before her after that, where I got to say a bit more than that first one where I read out a sentence or two. So it's good that we're doing this. I just also want to say, Mr. Speaker, that whilst this bill may in some ways seem perhaps a bit dry and in some ways not quite the word I'm looking for, but minor, behind it, of course, are some fundamental principles that are prerequisites really for the rule of law in this country, but more than that, actually also for liberal democracy and for, as I say, a functioning business community and economy, because behind all this is, of course, an independent judiciary where we have rule of law, not rule of men, or women for that matter, because we know that, he saves himself quickly, because we know, of course, that where you don't have that independence and you have simply people really working to their own standards, democratic values, and actually business values of open and fair conduct are threatened. And we see that, of course, in a number of states where really you can't rely on anything in government. You can't rely on anyone's word. There's really no ability to rely on food standards or any kind of commercial practice. I'm digressing, Mr. Speaker, but I come back to it. An independent judiciary, a judiciary that has a watchdog or a judicial conduct commissioner is an important pillar of both our business community, which is so important to us, our liberal democracy, and I commend this bill to the House.
I call the Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to follow the honourable member, especially when we hear these stories about his youthful appearances in